retail store in the Bronx, and I guess it was nickel and dime kind of business. We certainly weren't rich, but we got by. The draft was on, so I thought I'd get my term of military service done with as soon as possible, rather than have it hanging over my head later on. Everybody went, rich or poor, unless you got a deferment for one reason or another, you went. I became a radio operator. After basic training, I had about 12 weeks of radio school where I learned how to operate various radios that the Army used. And I guess from walkie-talkies to heavier, I forgot the names of all these different radios. But anyway, that was a 12-week course where you also learned the Morse code and telegraphy and how to uncode, decode and code messages. It was shipped overseas to Korea. Some of my radio graduating class went to Europe, but most went to Japan and Korea, and then most of those went to Korea. First, we had to get from the East Coast to the West Coast. We took a train with sleepers, overnight sleepers, and that took about 2 days or 3 days from the New York area to the West Coast. And from there, we boarded a ship that went to Japan first and then to Korea. And I can remember as we boarded the ship, there was a ship that had pulled into the adjoining dock with veterans of the war aboard. And as they disembarked and saw us boarding the ship taking us to Korea, they were all yelling at us, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry," which, by the way, we did to the troops 2 years later. Korea was, the parts that I saw just completely devastated, especially the cities. But there weren't many. I was stationed near Seoul with an engineering construction battalion, and so I got to see a bit of Seoul on weekends, and it was completely devastated. To downsize, so as the war ended, and so our engineer battalion was disbanded, so I was shipped up to the truce line to an infantry division and at a regimental headquarters, and I got to finally got to use my skills as a radio operator, and we operated one in a tent. We had a communications tent, and we had standard radios there. And I reacquainted myself with that particular type of radio. One time, some of the communications people had to patrol the hills, inspecting telephone lines that were laid between regimental headquarters and the different battalions. And they needed a radio operator with a portable radio in case there were minefields around those telephone lines, in case somebody stepped on a mine. So of course they picked me to accompany them. It was a sergeant and a private. I didn't even know if the batteries were working or not. And God, if anything had happened, if we had stepped on a mine, I never would have been able to communicate back to the home base. So off we go with me complaining all the time about how I didn't know how to operate the radio and how I wasn't used to going up and down hills until the sergeant told me to shut up. The devastation of it that I saw in the country. And the way, at least how some of the Korean soldiers in their army treated members of the Korean Service Corps who were old papasans, mostly all laborers, 40 to 50 years old, who were used to supply American soldiers up in the hills, I guess. And there was a Korean, I recall, a Korean sergeant in charge of these old papasans. He would slap them around and hit them, and well, I knew I wouldn't interfere because he would lose face if I tried to stop that, so I never really did. But I was shocked, kind of shocked at that. He had seen fighting during the war, and he told me he had seen American soldiers drop their guns and run. Times when that did happen. It happened in the early part of the war, and then it happened when the Chinese came in so suddenly. I wouldn't, if I were drafted, that's one thing, but I certainly wouldn't enlist.